This episode of Troxel is supported by ArcVision. Save 5% off anything and everything, including any type of license of the just released Rhino version 8 when you buy from arcvision.com/store and use code TRXL at checkout. That's ARCHVISION.com/store and use code TRXL at checkout and save 5% off your entire order. Just make sure you do it before December 31st, 2023. This episode of Troxel is supported by AVAIL. AVAIL helps AECO firms better manage, organize, and navigate information faster. Visit getavail.com today. This episode of Troxel is supported by Confluence, a small conference event for AEC professionals and technology providers to discuss industry trends and ideas together. It's put on by the fine folks at AVAIL. Learn more about the upcoming invite-only event happening in the spring of 2024 in New York City during this episode. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Troxel Podcast. I'm Evan Troxel. Just a quick announcement before we get into this one that this is the last episode of 2023. I've got some great episodes in the production pipeline here at Troxel HQ, and I am so looking forward to releasing them, but we'll all have to wait until 2024 to hear them because I'm taking some much needed time off to reset. I plan on spending some quality time with my family, get out on the trails on my mountain bike, and do some rock climbing, and I hope that you too enjoy the last couple weeks of 2023. This was a big year for the podcast. I released 34 new episodes this year, which I think is pretty decent considering I moved to a new state. During that time, I also launched a new website and AEC Tech newsletter, which you should definitely go subscribe to at trxl.co and hit one of the subscribe buttons on the page there. I'd like to know your thoughts on the podcast this year, especially what was your favorite episode? You can send me an email at evan@evantroxel.com, or you can get in touch through my feedback form at trxl.co/feedback. I want to give a special thanks to all of the guests who have come on the show this year. There are way too many to name, but you can see all of them on my latest website edition at trxl.co/guests. I also want to thank my partners and sponsors of the podcast this year, who included Randall Stevens and Jim Clifton at AVAIL and Confluence, Boris Rappaport and Alex Osanenko at ArcIT, Clifton Harness and Laura Passiano at TestFit, and Corey Rubidou at ArcVision. These are truly incredible people, and I am so grateful to get the chance to work with them and talk about them on this podcast. They really are supporting what I'm doing here. And my deepest gratitude goes out to all of you listeners as we track the coevolution of architecture and technology together. All right. In this episode, I welcome Emil Poulsen. Emil is an application developer and AEC technology specialist focused on developing tools for the building industry. With a background in architecture, engineering, and software, his goal is to enhance design processes through technology, from concept to implementation. Currently based in Stockholm, Sweden, Emil works remotely for Core Studio at Thornton Tomasetti. He also runs Modelup, a 3D configurator studio, on a part-time basis. In this episode, we discuss the challenges and opportunities of implementing new technologies in the AEC industry, both internally within a firm, but also externally as products. We delve into the importance of communication, buy-in, and cultural change when introducing new tools and processes, the culture of AEC Tech and the entrepreneurial spirit at TT, Emil's insights from his experience in developing tools and pushing for adoption within a global engineering firm, the benefits of participating in hackathons like the recent 2023 AEC Tech event hosted by Core Studio in New York City, and we talked about his work on web-based 3D configurators for digital products at Modelup. So, without further ado, I bring you Emil Poulsen. Emil, welcome to the podcast. Great to have you.
Thanks, Evan. Pleasure to be here.
You are streaming to me from Sweden. I can't remember if you're the first Swedish guest, but I just had somebody from Norway on. I'm going to hit all the Nordic countries here, I hope.
That's all right. As long as you don't mention Switzerland, I think you're good. Because that's the common mix-up, right? I think they did an IPO of Spotify at Wall Street, and they rolled out the Swiss flag, and everyone was like, "Are you
serious?
What's going on?"
What? Yeah.
So it's a common mix-up. Yeah.
I've been to Sweden one time. So Håvard Vashag was just on the show, and he's in Oslo.
He's in Oslo.
And Carl Christensen from Autodesk from Oslo, also, I believe. And now where are you in Sweden? Give us an idea of the geography. Stockholm. Okay, so I've been to Stockholm one time, and nice. My mother's side of the family is from Finland, and that was kind of the impetus to go to just to go visit. And so I had to do it all, had to do all of it for sure.
That's
but
great.
Absolutely wonderful place on earth to go visit for sure.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, it's a good place, I guess, in many different aspects. Pretty dark these days or this season of the year,
Yeah.
But
not emotionally. Maybe this season. But yeah, I was wondering where you were going to go with it when you.
No, I meant actual dark. Like
yes, right.
I think at the peak around in December, close to Christmas, we have like 5 hours of sunlight or something like that. So
right.
You got to charge during the summer, and so you survive the winter. That's how it works.
You're at those northern latitudes. Yes, definitely. I have experienced that. I did not go to Sweden when it was this time of year. I went in the summertime, and but I have experienced what you're talking about in Alaska, where the sun just moves kind of horizontally across the horizon. It just never goes down. Part of the year, and then the other half of the year, like it just never comes up, right?
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah, and that is a mind trip for somebody who lives, the lower latitudes, and it's just like, the typical structure all day, and we can't even get used to a time change, right? We just had daylight saving time, and even that just throws us off completely. It when I see things like that where I can't get used to for weeks at a time 1 hour difference, or another example, and this is just a super silly example, moving the trash can from under the sink from one side to the other and remembering which door to open. It's incredible for me how hard that is to just update my habit of which one to open. It just gives me a lot of pause when I think about change in the AEC industry. How hard, how difficult change is when I can't even remember which cabinet door to open, implementing new technologies, implementing new... If I can't even remember where the trash is, how am I going to change my business to adopt new technologies to help me do things better? And do you ever think of things like that? Because that's what goes on in my mind.
Totally, for sure. I mean, I think for a long time in the beginning of my career, I thought it was all about technology, just creating better tools, more efficient tools, more efficient processes. But really, it's a cultural thing, isn't it? Like, you got to get the buy-in from the people you work with. And if no one really buys in, then there's not really much meaning to developing these tools anyway. So for sure, I mean... Yeah, just like having everyone on board with what you're doing. And I think that's also something that we do quite a lot in Core Studio. I mean, one part is obviously developing the technology and the tools, but just having that sort of mechanism to reach out and just like connect with people within the company and get their input and really make a environment where everyone feels involved is super important.
It's a core attribute of leadership also. And I think for those who are in leadership, it feels annoying. But for those who are not in leadership, it's a requirement to understand, is that the same message must be repeated over and over and over, especially when you're going in a new direction, you're charting some new territory, maybe for your office or for your practice or whatever. And if you're in leadership, it's like social media. It's like, I don't want to post the same thing even twice. I don't even want to talk about my episodes more than once, because I have this release schedule of every week. And it's like, okay, I'm done with the other one. I'm on to the new one. This is very much how it is in practice with projects as well, right? But the idea of repetition to form new habits and make
Yeah.
sure everybody's on the same page. Not everybody hears the same thing at the same time. Not everybody interprets it the same way each time. And so why I say it's annoying is because like I don't want to even hear myself, let alone my peers, talk about the same thing over and over and over. But again, like that's the only way things actually change. And so many times we see this with digital practice or IT departments where they deploy a new tool onto the firm and nobody uses it, right? But because there's like this one, like let's throw it over the wall and let's just expect adoption. And that never happens.
Never works.
but we're always in that mode. We're always because we're on to the next thing and the next thing, and we need to implement, and we need to see digital transformation, and we need to see the march of change. But if nobody's adopting it, there's no change happening, right? And so then it comes back to this idea of communication and buy-in, like you're talking about, and it's like because we don't understand marketing, we don't understand promotion, we don't understand habit forming. To its core, like we do projects and we can treat deployments as projects, we can treat new technologies as implementations as projects, and we're typically just project minded about it. Okay, that's done next, that one's done next. It's very kind of assembly line. But understanding the psychological, the implementation of different languages and communication styles that different people in different places need to hear because that's how they will latch onto it best is an art. And anyway, we're totally digressing here and getting away from the point. But these are the kinds of things that I love talking about this with smart people who have done this. And you're developing at Core Studio, you're developing things for the industry. You're developing tools, I should say, for the industry. And we've always seen a gap between innovation and like deployment of tools and adoption of tools. And you're even coming at it from you're supporting the industry because you're structural engineers, and it's got to be even harder because you're like one from the architecture side of things. You're one step removed from the building. You're building, you're creating systems for buildings, and I would just wonder if communicationally, if that's even a word, how do you guys deal with that? How do you? Is it through going to conferences and constantly talking about what this technology can deliver, showing it in use, showing how people are using it, that you continue to kind of educate the market on these new tools?
No, for sure. I mean, obviously that's one part. I think it's probably a good idea to separate between the kind of internal push and the external push. I mean, I would say like probably 85% of all the tools we develop is really internal tools. And then the process gets somewhat easier because, I mean, you're kind of colleagues with your users. So you can always walk around the office, tap someone on the shoulder and what's up? Is it not working? Like what's going on, etc.
Right.
So, but that's a process as well. I mean, as you were talking about, like it's not going to happen automatically. Like there has to be some channel of communication, and has to be some way of kind of spreading the word. And that can be a challenge for sure, because it's always like, if you look at tech companies, like you usually have someone dealing with the UX, someone dealing with the design of a user interface, someone actually developing the front end, someone developing the back end, someone actually being the product manager. There is like this huge list of different roles really. And typically what happens at R&D departments or computational specialist departments at architecture and engineering offices is that you usually have all these people or like all these roles crammed into few people. So you become sort of a master of kind of handling everything in a way. And that can be quite refreshing, I think, because you get to see really like all different aspects of the process. I mean, everything from idea creation to really implementation and then, adoption and just getting that feedback and so forth. So, I think that's really, where we do most of our communication, like just like internally deploying the tools and, getting adoption internally. And
Yeah.
I mean, I guess that's also a benefit of having, 1,500 people working in the same company using the tools, because, you can test it out. And if it actually works, you can start sketching on the ideas of actually getting it outside of the company as well.
I want to ask I'm going to foreshadow a question. I don't want you to answer right now, but I want to do this to kind of pre-bookmark a piece of the conversation,
Right.
which is you're practicing structural engineering offices, global presence, and you have decided to productize these internal tools. And I'm sure that there's a whole decision-making process about what's useful internally versus maybe even what you would push out externally. And I don't know how closely those products match, right? But the idea of making that decision to productize and deploy software tools, I think is super interesting. Most firms don't do it. If they do, it's kind of, an open source kind of a manner. You're not trying to make it a viable income stream necessarily, because they're very small, piecemeal things. You've figured out how to deploy bigger things and put them out there as products. You have to support them. Like you mentioned, all the key pieces of what you're doing. And I guess, it's the whole idea of what Thornton Tomasetti has done with kind of Core Studio, incubating and accelerating other people's ideas, turning them into products, I think is super interesting. Like I said, I don't want to get there yet. I want to get there. So that's why I'm bringing it up now, because it was crossing my mind as you're saying all those things. Before we do that, Emil, give us an idea of where you're coming from and why you've decided this career path for you.
No, for sure. So I studied architecture and engineering at Chalmers University here in Sweden. I started back in 2009. Did my bachelor's degree, 3 years. So that's really a mix of pretty kind of typical structural engineering program, and so that's essentially 50% of the program, and then you have the other 50%, which is pretty typical architectural design projects and stuff. So what happens is, like, you start, maybe not for the first year, maybe like somewhere around like the second year, you start to think about, hey, how can I actually apply my skills within design and architecture into structural engineering, the way that you start thinking about engineering problems, and vice versa. Like, hey, can I actually bring in some of these engineering concepts into my design projects? And to kind of bridge that, the way that I see it is, at least, is through computation and tooling, really, and just like being able to kind of sketch mathematically. That's a pretty interesting concept, I think. Just like being creative with engineering and math and programming. And I mean, I guess I joined the grasshopper cult quite soon in my career, probably, I don't know, 2010 or something like that, and kind of never looked back, really. And that was, I guess, the gateway drug to getting to heavier stuff. Obviously, like some scripting and programming. And so yeah, I did that. I took a gap year between my master's and my bachelor, and moved to the UK, where I did an internship at Bureau Happold. So that was a great time. I worked with some really amazing people and got to work in some really, really interesting problems. Mainly like, football stadiums and some bigger train station buildings and stuff like that. And, there wasn't really any choice there. Like, we had to automate things and processes. And I mean, especially if you work for engineering companies, one common problem is just like turning geometry into clean stick models that you can analyze, right? So that's an important topic. So lots of interoperability, like just lots of automation in terms of, really kind of observing how engineers work and how they design components and systems, and trying to take their process and work with that. It's always about context and just understanding how your colleagues work, and you can kind of attack the automation aspect from that angle. So kind of did that for a year, went back to Chalmers, where I completed my structural engineering master's, and then I continued with my architecture master's. So I have a duo kind of master's degree there. Although I've never actually really officially worked as neither an architect or structural engineer. I mean, I kind of got into this, hybrid, basically, computational design or just design technology. So I joined TT Core Studio in 2016 and moved to New York, where I lived for 2 years, and kind of started out as a kind of developer slash computational designer, just helping out in projects, maybe like 50%, I think it was in the beginning, and then developing tools for the other 50%. But I quite quickly got into full-time development, probably after like half a year or so. And it's great. I think it's just a really fascinating thing to do, just like being surrounded by all these smart people working on really interesting projects, and just be there and help out automating tools. And as you kind of mentioned earlier, like Core Studio is made up of really two parts. We have the application development team, and then we have the core modeling team. And what usually happens is that the core modeling team, they work with project teams on projects that are complicated or geometrically complex. Mm-hmm. And when they have seen a pattern in enough projects, like they come to us and we talk about generalizing the solution. So that's typically how it works, like just having that kind of back and forth dialogue between the modeling and application development. And obviously the whole company is quite key for what we do.
This episode is made possible in collaboration with ArcVision. Are you planning on getting software before the year ends? Maybe you need to use your budget in 2023 or want to upgrade to something new, like the just released Rhino version 8. Rhino 8 introduces amazing new tools for architectural design. One standout feature is the push-pull tools, which are incredibly powerful and even work on curved surfaces. The new inset command and auto C-plane tools enhance the architectural modeling experience. There are also new features like auto-updating clipping section drawings, shrink wrap, which is amazing for 3D printing, and new display types, including a fast and beautiful built-in render engine. Rhino also now supports new Grasshopper data types, and bonus, upgrades from any older version of Rhino are currently 33% off for a limited time. By purchasing anything at arcvision.com/store and using the code TRXL at checkout, you can not only support Droxel, but you'll also get 5% off your order. ArcVision is an authorized reseller of Rhino, SketchUp, Enscape, V-Ray, and more. So whether you're a student, an individual practitioner, or part of a firm with multiple licenses, if you're looking to buy architectural software before the end of 2023, visit arcvision.com/store and use code TRXL at checkout and save 5% off your order. The link will also be in the show notes. My thanks to ArcVision for collaborating with the Troxel podcast. And now, let's get back to the conversation. Going back to your school, the idea of an integrated structural engineering and architectural program is really interesting to me, because the problem set, or maybe the nature of the mind that when it goes after these problems, those are two very different ways of solving problems, right? Like the idea of design being a very wicked problem, unknown unknowns, discovery process, trying to synthesize a multitude of inputs into a solution. Nobody knows what that path is going to be. And as we all experienced in school and studio, we experienced a different solution from every single person, even though it was the same scope of project, right? Engineering, though, is very different, right? It's kind of reverse engineering that final into like what it actually takes to hold that thing up. I think that's very interesting from a like both sides of the brain problem set. I mean, I haven't actually heard of that, at least in the U.S. Most people go to architecture school or they go to engineering school. Is that really what attracted you, or did you just not know which one you preferred and you kind of figured it out along the way? Like where did that come from in you?
Yeah, Yeah, no, that's a good question. I mean, I think I've always been interested in design and art, obviously, and just mathematics and physics and all that stuff. I don't think I was particularly interested in buildings, to be honest, when I when I actually started studying architecture engineering. So yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe it was kind of an open-ended answer to an open-ended question there. Like, you know, I can postpone my decision a bit more. But yeah.
Yeah, interesting. That whole world has got to be the idea of going to architecture school and doing really wild designs because you can, right? Because everybody's a designer, and then having to have this kind of accountability partner of the structural side of things. Where was that what projects were like? It was they were much more grounded in that sense.
Yes and no. I mean, you know, we did a lot of projects that just require some amount of, you know, structural mechanics understanding. Like if you design a bridge, for instance, like it's just part of the design. Like how is it actually going to work? You know, think of a suspension bridge, for instance. Like there is a meaning and there is an idea of the structural concept. So I think that was really part of the sketch process, right? Like, you know, you almost like sketch, you know, force diagrams and sketch arrows and like, you know, how are we going to support this load, etc. So it's, I kind of agree that it's obviously different professions with completely like different backgrounds, but I kind of like the idea that it doesn't necessarily mean that it's completely different in terms of, you know, procedure, etc. But no, for sure. I mean, I think I had one project just came to mind now. There was a bridge project and I designed a sine wave bridge, and it was just like sine waves all over the place. I think I just started to learn Grasshopper and like went all in for it. And I think I even went as far as deciding the staircase as a sine wave. And like the teacher told me, like, people are gonna die in this staircase. You can't do that. Like, so maybe it was clear from that point that I wasn't gonna be a good architect anyway. But yeah, now I guess I was. No, exactly. I was just interested in, you know, tooling and I guess the process really. So yeah.
There's definitely something really attractive about that visual programming process and watching the math turn into geometry. And I think a lot of times people go into learning a tool like that because they're interested in parametric control over geometry and updating things and playing with things in that sense.
Yeah.
Using that programming too, like you said earlier, like you talked about sketching with math, right? Like this idea of sketching through visual programming, I think is a totally valid concept. And a lot of people do that, but they don't necessarily think about it as math, right? They think about it as geometric, like how you're going to see that geometry in the end and being able to control that. Yeah, but the idea of looking at it like a function, looking at it, right? Because that's what it is. It's like first this, then this, then this, and it's constantly rippling through until you see the output. And if you go back and change something, you see the update. But thinking about that mathematically, I think is really interesting. And people who get into Grasshopper start to think like that. And it definitely, that the tool reinforces that. And when I went to school, there was no visual programming. There was no, it was all just hard modeling, right? It was all polygon modeling, solid modeling, some surface modeling, but it was purely geometry, right? Geometry was my favorite math class for sure. Like understanding those concepts and it was very visual. I think it's definitely a different piece of the mind that operates in that Grasshopper space. And I think for me, when I got into that eventually, very late, way later than what you're even talking about when you were in school, it was just very much, it was like stretching a new muscle. And I found that really intriguing because it was just something that I hadn't experienced before. And it was a new way of searching for design solutions. And obviously there's a lot of power there, right? To be able to make a small change and watch it ripple throughout is incredibly empowering as somebody who did not learn how to code, did not learn and it just made it democratized the ability for me and many others to code in quotes, right? Because it is coding, but at the same time, it doesn't feel like coding, right? So it's really interesting to think about all that and how it's kind of changed the pursuit of architecture over the years, and it's kind of an incredible thing to kind of extract out and look at that piece of it and what David Rutten was able to accomplish with a tool like that.
No, for sure. Yeah.
The idea of let's get back to Core Studio and Thornton Tomasetti. So you were in New York, you said, and is that really where you were introduced to Thornton Tomasetti and what you're doing?
Yes. Yes and no. I guess, I was certainly interested in the idea of computational design and programming and technology within the AEC industry before that. But Thornton Tomasetti Core Studio was obviously my first real job in a way, right? Okay. So I got to see how things worked in practice for real, and obviously have learned a lot from just being there and working with all these great people. So it was an eye opener in many ways, and still is. So yeah.
And when you were looking for that first job, obviously you have interest in computational design and problem solving. Were you specifically looking for a place to land that was a core piece of how they did what they did, or what was that decision like for you? Was it based on that or not?
I think obviously, like having the opportunity to work with processes, I think was a key component in this. Core Studio is really just research and kind of developing tools for the practice, right? So I kind of was interested in pursuing a career in academia early on as well, but at the same time, it's just a pretty awesome thing to just be around real projects solving real problems. So I think that was certainly something that I was interested in. And I heard about Core Studio for long before I joined. So it was kind of a known figure in the industry, obviously. And then I had a friend who had done an internship a year prior, so she kind of connected me, and I was lucky to get involved.
I'm thinking back to the first time that I think that I heard about Core Studio, which I again would probably not be early days for Core Studio at all, but just my awareness of it was when, and I mentioned this to you a minute ago, but Daniel Seagraves was presenting at a USC BIMBOP many years ago, probably around 2016 or so. Yeah. And he was talking about Asterisk as one of your new tools in development, and it was kind of a preview of the kinds of projects that you were working on. And that was the first time that I think I ever was introduced to the idea of a practice, structural engineering practice, let alone architectural practice or whatever, starting to productize or thinking about an internal tool being used outside of their practice. And I thought that was fascinating, and it was all done through the web, and I think there was maybe some Grasshopper components that went along with it to connect those things together. And that to me was kind of eye-opening at that point, and that to me showed the seriousness of Core Studio really being this thing inside of a larger practice, because it really, when it's all tied to projects, when the core functionality of a thing like that inside it, if you think about it as this group of people and they're just supporting projects, the projects rule everything, right? So it seemed to me like there had to be, and I didn't get to ask him this, but there has to be this layer of, I don't know, isolation, not isolation, but separation from the projects. And you guys said you kind of do two things. You support the practice, but you also work on these products, and you even work on the products first. They're driven out of the needs and the patterns that are being seen by the practice. Can you talk about that? Because your group is not huge, but you're kind of standalone, right? Like, you have How many people are in
I
your
think we're
group?
20 plus.
I was going to say 20. Yeah.
Yeah, something like that.
Okay.
So no, for sure. I mean, that's always the dream, right? Like you work on tools and you can build it to a project, and client pays for the development and everyone is happy. But yeah, it doesn't really work that way, because projects have deadlines and they have
Right.
priorities, and so I think that's an important aspect. Like if you actually want to get serious with tool development, it
Yeah.
sort of has to be outside of the project work. As you said, like obviously you can still be informed, and it can be very much a nice accelerator, just like testing out the tools and kind of getting feedback and push the development forward. But developing
You have a
tools,
built-in beta audience, right?
right? Yeah, pretty much.
Have that pool.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I would also separate between scripting and tool development. Those are two different things. Like using computational design tools to accelerate projects. I mean, it's kind of a way of modeling, I would say.
Yeah.
But if you actually want to go into developing robust tools, it's going to need documentation, it's going to need testing, it's going to need like all these things that just get very hard to do within the scope of a project. So yeah, I mean, I think we're very lucky to have that environment in Thornton Tomasetti, and just being able to work on these projects and tools.
It just seems very prescient, I guess. I don't know the right word, but the idea of TT investing in this smaller entity within the larger firm, obviously, like you said, you get to. It's a great place to be because you have the resources of this very large firm, and you have this layer of separation in that I would assume like the leadership of Core Studio making decisions about products, about which direction to go, and then also like TT gets to brag about Core Studio, right? Like it's this really cool thing that they do, that they are pushing. They're constantly on the bleeding edge of what they're doing, and that positions TT in a different segment of the market. I mean, there's other firms doing similar things, right? But this to me was kind of like, again, the first time I had seen that. And so like the idea of having an innovation incubator inside of a firm that operates semi-independently under the umbrella of TT, and having that I mean, it's a useful relationship in both directions, obviously. That to me is just something that more people need to think about, right? Because when you have a team in-house, like you said earlier, that does scripting, that just supports projects, and are constantly helping those teams hit their deadlines or whatever. That is a very different thing than product development, right? And it takes a different approach. It takes a different skill set. And so I guess what I'm saying is like you can't decide to do it like you guys have done it and have it fully integrated, and because it's just that would just be something entirely different. A lot of firms are doing that, in fact, right? But this is unique than what most firms do, and I don't really know where I'm going with that, but I observations, things that I've been thinking about as I've watched TT and Core Studio, kind of the way that you guys talk about the work that you do outwardly is really interesting.
No, for sure. I mean, as you said, like I think Core Studio plays an important role in the presentation of TT as well, as you mentioned. Just being able to show, all the tools that we develop and all the, routines and automation scripts and everything like that, like our partners get access to if they work with us, is a pretty strong motivation and, pretty good sales pitch. So for sure, I mean, it's, Core Studio has a good presence on the company slides, so to speak. Right. It's, got to think about the presentation for sure.
Talk about some of the products that you have developed. So I know about Constru and Asterisk, and I'm sure there are others, but those are the ones that kind of pop to my mind immediately. Can you just talk about the types of things that you are productizing and putting out and making available to others to use, and why you've decided to make those tools available. I mean, obviously there's an advantage to you guys where if you are working on a project with an architectural firm, say, and they're using those tools to talk to you. But beyond that, I mean, I kind of assume there's also this ability for people to just use that tool, and you're just applying, you build the tool, people push something in, they get something back out, they can use it. I mean, talk about that, because that to me is very different than a traditional consultant relationship on a larger design team.
No, for sure. I mean, I think, don't quote me on it, but I think the first public tool we made was the TT Toolbox plugin for Grasshopper.
Right.
Which is, I don't know how many thousands of downloads it has, but quite a lot. And that's really just like a good mix of different, Grasshopper components that we thought were good to have, really. So I don't know when that was released, probably back in like 2013 or 14 maybe.
I'll have to look that up on Food for Rhino. There's probably a history of that.
Yeah, for sure. We actually made a new release like a year ago, something like that. Just updating some good stuff, just throw in some more goodies there. But I think there is certainly kind of a marketing component to this, right? Like you deploy these tools for free, like people get to use it. Maybe that was actually how I actually got familiar with TT and Core Studio in the first place, actually, thinking about it. So
that makes sense, yeah.
That's one aspect, just like getting the tools out there, getting people to use them, kind of build up that community. I guess the AEC Tech conference is probably something we can chat about later as well. But it's very much about just like building up that community and getting partners and get to know people in the industry, obviously. And after that, I think Construe was probably the second product that we launched outside of TT. I mean, from the Core Studio perspective, there is another component of TT that do more kind of scientific tooling, and they have a pretty strong background in this kind of tool development. But from the Core Studio side, I would say Construe, which is really just the interoperability platform, and that was also it existed in a different format. In the beginning, it was way more kind of desktop based. Like you would save your geometry database into a file. You could send this file around or place it on a network drive somewhere. And then back in 2015-ish, we started to build a cloud solution for it. And I mean, as we've talked about, it's a good opportunity to really test out the tools and ideas and prototyping internally, and then kind of test the waters outside of the company. Since then, I mean, as Asterisk, as we talked about, it's really a structural optioneering tool. Like the idea is as you as an architect, or if you're in a project, early stage project, like from a massing. Can you generate a structural wireframing such that you can make some early guesses about, how much is this going to cost? Like what's going to be the embodied carbon? All these like early decisions about the building system. I was involved in that project mainly on the geometry side. Like given this massing geometry, how do we actually generate a structural wireframing that we can use for different things? So I think that was probably the first time that I really started to work with the Rhino Common Rhino API, which is a fantastic API. It just has the perfect level of abstraction for me as a computational person, really just like understanding, not having to, revisit mathematics from some engineering class, but just like, okay, I have this plane, I want to intersect it with this mesh, like, how do I do it? We really built the whole geometry engine using Rhino Common. And this was pre Rhino Compute, which I think was released back in 2018 or something like that.
Yeah,
so we had a pretty
right.
interesting ad hoc solution to actually being able to put that on a server, because that was the idea. Like you had the web application, and you would provide your inputs of the massing, and then you can toggle different inputs and really see a visualization of the structural model, but also some quantitative outputs, like what's the tonnage, how much it's going to cost, etc.
I remember that. And when you said optioneering, it made me think about how you're doing optioneering. And it was like you could choose different structural types, right? I mean, as an example, it wasn't like you were spitting out 1,000 generative steel structures for that mass. It was like you had a few different types to choose from. And then, like you said, you start to quantify it, and you could put numbers to it for cost or things like that to give you. The whole idea of this tool was to get to inform a designer, at least give them something to base a conversation on when they're talking about how they're going to make decisions to move forward. So which structural system and why. The earlier I can get that information plugged into my mass, which is just super basic, actual blobby mass, right? And start to see what that structure could look like inside of there, I think was incredible. It gives a designer superpowers because they know more than any other architect would about that, right? Because if they're using a tool like that, they just have more information to work with earlier, which helps them make better decisions.
No, for sure, exactly. I think that's right. It's really about like what's the information and how much do you get at a certain stage in a project, and it's always hard, like how much control do you actually provide here. So that was something that we thought about a lot. Like, is it enough just providing some distance for the base sizes here, or should we really allow the user to provide grid lines, and to what level of detail do we specify the structural framing? Like, should we separate between the floors and the columns and the beam systems? Like, there are just tons of different options there, and it's somewhere you got to make a decision. Like, okay, we'll support this, but we'll wait this until someone asks for it.
This episode is made possible with support from AVAIL. In a world where precision meets creativity, where every line drawn holds the power to innovate, people like you are shaping the future. But let's face it, in the realm of design, the unknown is your least favorite companion. You've been stranded on the island of inefficient software, lost in the fog of endless searching for the right content. It's time to embark on a new journey, a journey to clarity, efficiency, and design excellence. It's time to get off that island and away from the unknown. Introducing AVAIL, the beacon in your design odyssey. Say goodbye to the daunting 10 to 20 minutes wasted per search, the costly interruptions in your creative flow. With AVAIL, your team will zip through content discovery, focusing more on designing and less on searching. Imagine a world where you can stop constantly fighting the costly fires caused by pulling content from past projects, building from scratch, or relying on personal libraries. AVAIL isn't just a tool, it's a revolution for AECO firms. Organize, manage, and navigate your project information with a leader that's proven in reliability, relatability, and success. Join the ranks of the top AECO firms who've already chosen AVAIL. In just 30 days, you could deploy AVAIL and witness a dramatic reduction in costly design errors. Whether it's your first CMS or you're considering a switch, there's someone you should meet. Will Rouse, your guide to all things AVAIL. Schedule an appointment and explore AVAIL's capabilities, onboarding programs, and professional services. Don't let your designs be clouded by inefficiency. Clear skies are just a click away. Go to getavail.com/stranded and book a meeting with Will to start your AVAIL journey today. AVAIL, where your best design is just a search away. My thanks to AVAIL for supporting this episode of the Troxel Podcast. And now, let's get back to the conversation. Sky's the limit when it comes to development until you actually have to have people do it, right? So I'm sure the ideas were plentiful, but what you actually decided to ship in those first iterations of that product had to be scaled back to kind of like the
Yeah.
the least, right? It had to be to how can this add value, but also like let's go through this iterative process of deploying a tool over time. We're going to play the long game with a tool like this. We're not going to try to cram it all into a version 1 release and then see what people think about it. So did you get a lot of feedback from firms about the kinds of things that would be more useful to them over time, and these things were already on your list and you're like, yep, that's potentially on the roadmap, or were you actually hearing new ideas that you guys had never thought of?
No, for sure. We heard a lot of interesting ideas as early feedback, but also, going back to the discussion about like how much control do you actually provide. I think we made some pretty crude assumptions about grid lines. Like, our idea was like, okay, we're probably going to be better at guessing. Grid lines is a big thing in structural engineering. Like, you essentially have a massing, right? And then, you place grid lines, and in those intersections, you place columns, and then you kind of work from the system upwards. That was one of the things that we kind of assumed that we would know better than the user, which turned out to be kind of wrong, I would say. Mm-hmm. So then we started to experimenting with
I'm just laughing because I remember moving grid lines like an inch or two, right, all the time. And the engineer would be pissed, right? But it was always like, well, here's why. And you talk through it and, okay, everybody's, okay, yep, we should do that. Or we shouldn't do that, here's why. But to your point, like, it's not an easy thing to just guess where those.
No, exactly. And, it's always like, sometimes if you have buildings that aren't completely extruded, you're going to end up with some additional grid lines that are not present on the ground floor. So it got just more and more complicated until we decided to actually, maybe we actually need some kind of editing functionality of the grid lines there. But we do actually have a Rhino plugin for Asterisk as well, which kind of allows you to, edit the massing inside of Rhino and sort of have the system, computed really real time. So
that's computing it locally on the user's machine?
No, it's not.
Okay.
So that was a decision we made to kind of keep the geometry engine remote. Because the idea was like, okay, you use Rhino and the modeling tools in Rhino to kind of author your massing, right? And then you can essentially upload it to the system. And you can still like have Rhino running and edit it. We even had like a live sculpt mode, which would kind of react to everything you made in Rhino, like all the changes to the massing. But the idea was to kind of still have the ability to make it available without Rhino, so to speak.
Okay.
So yeah. And then of course, like just being able to kind of see all the different configurations in some diagram, which was obviously inspired by a hackathon project we I think was developed in an AEC Tech probably 2015 or something like that, called Design something. Yeah, Design Explorer. That's it. So really this kind of parallel diagram of like, different permutations of parameters just like visualized in a intuitive fashion, which actually took off and became another product that we've worked on called Thread, which is really about kind of exploring data and BIM data and structural data and different data associated with geometry really. So that's a big thing also in structural engineering. Like you have this base model, like some base geometry. And then if you run structural analysis on it, it's going to have a lot of metadata about engineering performance. And that can be a lot of data, gigabytes of data sometimes. And that can be quite hard to get an overview of or just like understand the data. So I would say big parts of what we do has to do with just visualizing data in a meaningful way.
Yeah. Let's talk about naming for a second. So this is not a meaty part of the conversation, but I think TT Toolbox was probably one of the default kind of packages that everybody downloaded at some point, right? There's like Lunchbox, TT Toolbox, Human UI. There's a few of them, right? And totally an engineer's name. Like you guys didn't even come up with a good animal
Yeah, no, exactly.
to name it. I mean, good
That's true.
branding for Thornton Tomasetti, but not in line with all the other animal names. So you get one demerit for that. But then the idea of asterisk, where's the name for asterisk come from? Do you know?
Yeah, I know exactly where it's coming from. It was like, we had some early prototypes and we just talked about how do we deal with potentially solutions that aren't good. And Rob, my boss at Thornton Tomasetti, or Core Studio, he proposed like, hey, maybe we should just put an asterisk under the whole thing, just saying like, hey, be careful. So that's where it
disclaimer.
Came from. Yeah, disclaimer.
It's a disclaimer. That's great. I kind of wondered if that's what it was because it's like take this with a grain of salt, kind of.
Pretty much. Pretty much.
We can't be held liable. I think that's an interesting idea about kind of governance of this solution, right? Which is like, use this at your own risk. Because these conversations have come up over the years, which is like, well, what if we make a tool and then somebody makes a decision based on that tool that leads to a bad outcome? Who's liable for that, right? And so then, you do have to have the legalese attached to every single thing that you put out into the world in this realm, which is like, use this at your own risk because there's no guarantees. All of these things that you read in the license agreements, right?
Exactly.
Is that something? I mean, with that, I assume that was a major conversation piece as you guys went into this.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely. And I think always when you work on tools like design tools that are, the whole idea is to use it in early stages, right? So there is always like a pretty low resolution of inputs coming in, like a massing. So yeah, it's just like you got to be careful about that, really, like, low resolution in, kind of low resolution out. So I think our, idea of just naming it asterisk was really that, like, okay, there is going to be low resolution here, but probably
so much so that you named your product. Yeah.
Yeah, but hopefully enough to make those early decisions. Should we go for timber? Should we like have a composite beam system here? Should we like go with this foundation system, etc.? Just like this, high level questions.
Helping people make those decisions earlier. Yeah. And now we live in a world where, the AI stuff is a headline a few days a week, right? And talking about this idea of hallucinations, right? Yeah, asterisk could be hallucinating as well. We didn't call it that back then, right? Yeah. But that's the idea, is like, we don't know every bit of context about your projects. We only know what you gave us, and from there we had to dissect that mathematically to turn it into bays, into a structural system, to size beams. I don't know if there's location data included in there or not, to kind of give, different regions have different codes, and there's a mess of a AEC world out there when it comes to all of that stuff. And so being able to custom tailor a solution is definitely a very different process than what you're offering here in the beginning, but it can help people make those decisions early. And those could be hallucinations, right? And we hear disclaimers all the time now. It's like double check all of this, because what it's spitting out may not be even true, right? Okay. Yeah. I guess that's something that the onus is on us as users to constantly be reminding ourselves to do that.
Totally. No, for sure. And actually, funny enough, there is a machine learning component to Asterisk on a component level. So we have a big library called Core Structure, which is really just tons of engineering equations and design, like structural engineering design routines that has been developed for many years. And the idea is really that, like, it's kind of the entire mind of TT kind of in this code base in a way. And
encapsulated, right?
Encapsulated in the code base, exactly. And
cool.
And it works well. But if you're designing thousands of beams and thousands of columns, like, there is a performance aspect to it. And if you're developing these like early stage rapid prototyping tools, it has to be performant. And just having that playfulness is extremely important, and that was something that we realized. You don't want to press a button and then wait for an hour to get some results. So that was one of the motives to actually look into just machine learning. Like, hey, we have these equations. Can we just like throw in a bunch of inputs here, get some outputs out, and then train a model to essentially learn how to size beams and columns? So when you do that, you get results within a millisecond or something. So
Wow.
so that was something that we actually started out doing like back in 2016, 17 as well. So we've been on the machine learning track for quite some time. Obviously now it's really started to take off, the whole AI discussion as well. And we had some ideas of how to start implementing some of that in the wireframing logic as well, like the structural wireframing logic, but never really got there. But it's a super interesting side of our industry to observe these days. I think just like the whole discussion about the AI and how things will change, and
I'm sure. So let's use this as a segue into AEC Tech and hackathons and things like that, because getting outside of your walls, again, this is something that's important, I assume, for you guys to infuse, like not only expose that culture to others who are not part of Core Studio and TT. Like, this is kind of like an academic tie-in, right? It's like, this is like being in a design studio, right? It's like, let's do this really intensive project-based. You define the project, but then you assemble a team. You go after doing something, but I'm sure that like the way that those dots get connected and the way those neurons fire in that environment is just invigorating for you. And I'm sure that you as Core Studio get a lot of value out of putting those events on, and you're also contributing and participating in those events at the kind of user level as well on teams, right? You guys had a recent project, Rhino Anywhere, right? So let's just chat about this general area from the high level all the way to working on a team and producing a new idea and putting a kind of proof of concept together and putting it out there. Let's start at the high level from a value proposition of putting on hackathons, the whole AEC Tech thing. Give us an overview of kind of where you stand in that whole thing.
No, for sure. I mean, we've been running the AEC Tech event for more than a decade now, actually.
Wow. Yeah.
And it's really composed of, I guess, three things. Like, first of all, you have the workshops, is where we essentially invite people to teach things. I mean, we usually have some folks from McNeil, the folks from Ladybug Tools, usually there. Hypar has been there. It's just a fantastic opportunity to get these really innovative people just like showcasing their stuff and like just showing, hey, this is a tool that we've been working on, or a feature that we've been working on. Just get that kind of one-to-one connection with the actual author of the tool is just amazing. So that's one component. And we have like virtual versions of that as well. Obviously something that got, more and more important during the COVID times, and we kind of stuck with that since then. And then we have the symposium, which is the, just like keynote speakers. We invite, interesting people, and, they present their stuff. And finally, which is obviously my favorite portion, is the hackathon, where people get together. So it starts out with the lightning rounds. So it's usually around 10 in the morning, something like that. You get a cup of coffee, and the pitches start. So if you have an idea, I mean, there isn't a microphone. That's why it's called the lightning rounds. Like, you just present maybe 1-2 minutes, just present an idea. If you have something yourself you want to present, you can do that, or just like sit back, listen into other people's ideas. And then there is the group formation process where, people just like, meet and greet kind of, and get together and start talking about, the hack projects. And then you have 24 hours to actually produce something out of it. And yeah, it's just a fantastic format to get things done in a way, because there really isn't that much time to, reflect on different trajectories, or like, should we do X or Y? It's got to be pretty fast, and that's I think that's a fascinating aspect of an industry that's otherwise quite slow, right? In thinking about like how long it takes to build buildings and design buildings. So yeah, I mean it's we host it yearly in New York, and we've kind of built up a pretty good community around it now. So we have a Slack channel, where people can communicate throughout the year, and it's just fun. Like there are a lot of new people showing up every year, and there are a good group of like core people that always like show up, and it's actually growing pretty good for every year now. And I think we had 16 hackathon projects presented last time now, and I think it was even 30 plus presentations in the lightning rounds. And yeah, it's kind of picking up speed, and it's all about like building that community and kind of discuss problems we have within the companies, like how can we get together and solve it, and learn from each other and so forth. So it's a fantastic event, and I'm really glad we have all those three components, because they really get together pretty well.
It's interesting to think about how over a decade it's probably shifted quite a bit from workflows to product. Yeah. That is potential, right? These are 16 potential products could come out of a hackathon, versus a decade ago it was like, how do I get this stuff from here to there, right?
No, for sure.
And I think that's pretty fascinating because of startup culture, venture capital, just everything's a pitch deck nowadays, and people have ideas, there's no end to them. So I think that's really interesting. And I wonder, like, people who go into this, they've been incubating, I assume, these ideas maybe for a little while at least, and they're presenting them. Like they're probably less on the fly inspiration from that conference, but it's like somebody's had this idea, they've been kicking around in their head for a while. I'm going to say it out loud and see who else here is interested. And then I also wonder if there's because I haven't been to this event, is there positioning in this presentation? Because you kind of suss out the different pieces, teammates, skills that they bring to the table, and is there kind of like this I really need you on my team because you're the WebGL guy or whatever. Is all that happening as well kind of behind the scenes?
Informally, yes, I would say, but there is no list of competencies that a specific hackathon project needs or anything like that. It's more organic, I would say. And sometimes you get up there, you pitch, and then you start talking with some people, and then this idea turns into something completely different. Like it's it's quite fascinating, just like having that sort of platform to you plant the seed, and then it becomes something completely different from what you thought initially. And actually, I think there is a good mix of people thinking about problems, like being really prepared for this hackathon, and other people that are just like, hey, okay, maybe just come up with something like 1 minute before the lightning round. So that was actually the case for the Rhino Anywhere project that I was involved in hacking on, which is really kind of a web client for 3D modeling using Rhino, using pixel streaming technology. Okay. Myself and my colleague Sergey, we kind of discussed different ways to get like Rhino more interactive. We were thinking about hooking up Galapagos, the genetic solver, with like Rhino Compute and REST Hopper, which was actually another hackathon project a few years ago. But then, we started to talk about like, hey, could we actually build something using pixel streaming instead? That would actually, just like stream the viewport to a browser. And that was sort of an idea that just came up like a few minutes before the pitches. So I think it's a good mix of people having actual problems that they have encountered in their daily daily work, they actually really want to solve, and then some people that just want to like mess around with some new technologies or like think about different ways of doing things and such.
There's been some incredible projects, and obviously we don't have time to go through them all, but as maybe a couple of examples, but I want you to land on Rhino Anywhere, because I'm sure it's still right there in the forefront of your mind, and maybe it even has some legs to go somewhere. Give some examples of the kinds of projects that have come out of AEC Tech hackathons.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's interesting because you always see a theme for every year. I think back in like 16, 17, it was all about like interoperability. Like, hey, can I turn this Revit model into, this Tekla model or, whatever. And then there was another year where it was like, okay, I have this 3D geometry. Now I want to visualize it in a browser. Can we do that? We had 1 year, I think it was probably when the Rhino Compute and Rhino Inside stuff was released, and everyone just put Rhino inside of other processes and was like everything. Rhino inside, Rhino inside everything. Can you guess what the theme for this year was?
No, not at all. I can't guess the 2 letters that this one was about.
No idea. Never. Yeah.
Nope. Not going to go for it. I'm not taking your bait right there.
No, for sure. But yeah, there were a lot of interesting like ChatGPT versions. Like someone built a really cool Clippy. You remember Clippy from the old Windows? Yeah. So
it looks like you're trying to write a business letter, right?
Exactly. So someone made a Clippy for Reddit. And that was quite interesting to see. It was pretty impressive. Like you typed in, so let's say you have a Revit model open up, and you say, hey, delete the beams on the top floor or something like that. So what the system would do, it would pick up the prompt, it would generate some code using the Revit API, compile it, and then execute it, essentially.
Wow.
So
sounds really dangerous.
Absolutely. That should have been called asterisk, probably.
You mean anyone can go into my model and delete stuff en masse, right? Yeah.
No, for sure. That was kind of part of the presentation as well. Like, major warning. Like, this is gonna mess your Revit model up. Like,
right. You might want to back up first. Yeah.
Exactly. For sure.
That's cool. I mean, my not taking the bait to say it was about AI was I hope that landed. But the idea of ChatGPT as a really good interface. I mean, the idea of text prompting to do things does democratize tools to a certain extent. That is absolutely incredible, right? To give anybody the ability, I mean, whether it's successful or not, to be able to type something in natural language versus find a tool, learn how to use it, apply it. Like, those are 2 different worlds. And to make it easier for people to make architecture, make structural models, do all those things, I think there's definitely something there.
No, for sure. I am also super interested in that. And I mean, as I said, like it's you can even apply it on, software development. Like you're getting into some new library or like some new, I don't know, SDK that you know nothing about.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the Matrix, right? This is when Neo says, I know Kung Fu, all of a sudden.
Exactly.
I mean, it's kind of like that. I mean, it's our ignorance has us putting those projects off, learning those things is now maybe turned into an advantage because I don't have to learn those things. I think that is really interesting. And with great power comes great responsibility, right? If you literally can delete the structure from the top floor, like you're giving somebody great power and also great responsibility when all these projects have so many stakeholders, so many team people working in the models at the same time. And it's like, you did what, right? It's no longer just like, I need you to sync to central. It's like, I need you to run all your prompts by me first, kind of a thing.
Yeah. No, for sure. Absolutely. It's, it's really fascinating. I mean, I think especially with, I'm really interested in the combination of, parametric design and kind of natural language. I mean, the idea of kind of having some sort of configurator or parametric model and using a prompt. It's all about like getting the GPTs to create that glue code, right? Like you have the natural language here, you have the configurator or some system here. Like, can the GPT figure out the glue between? Yeah, that's fascinating, because then you can get the GPT to write Revit code, or like code using the Revit API, or get Python, the GPT to actually or Python, or just like, hey, these are my parameters. Like, I want to create an L-shaped building with this type of roof. Here's the schema for all the parameters. Go. It's fascinating to see how things evolve there.
And we're seeing Hypar do that, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like describing a podium building in an L shape with 10 stories above it, and it thinks about it, and then there it is in full 3D. And is it exactly what you want? Maybe not, right?
No.
Probably not. But at the same time, like that took 10 seconds. Like that, from just writing a sentence and maybe editing that sentence to get something a little bit different is an amazing starting point.
Yeah.
And it goes back to the idea that Ian talked about in the very beginning, which is, why do we always start with a blank page? Why are we forced to start with a blank page? I mean, this is a super shortcut, right? To having something to bounce ideas off of, just through writing natural language. I think it's absolutely incredible, and it's a paradigm shift for the way we approach what we do. I mean, and what, like you're talking about Core Studio, we have ideas for AI, right? Like this wasn't a thing in AEC 5 years ago. Like this idea of using it as a tool to make stuff, let alone some of its other amazing uses to basically to categorize things automatically based on shapes and locations in room. Like we see it in so many different ways. Like there's adding structure to our unstructured data, like using computer vision to pick things out of an image and tell us what's in there. I think it's absolutely incredible to see all these things come together. And for us to ignore that is crazy to me. If firms are actively choosing to ignore that, I think it's crazy, because like this, the way that I used to talk about digital practice when I was running the digital practice team in our firm was like, we call it digital practice. It's just gonna be practice at some point. Like everybody needs to think like, and so this is another level of that. This is like, we call it AI, where it's just gonna be in everything, and you're not gonna be able to distinguish it as this other thing pretty soon, right? It's just going to be, and it already is in so many things, and we just don't label it under that label, but we see it all the time, right? In so many things that we do. So for people to ignore it, I think is kind of foolish at this point, because it is a paradigm shift. It will change the way that we approach, or it already has changed the way that we approach doing what we do.
No, for sure. And I mean, I think it's easy to laugh at it now, like looking at some, I don't know, pictures, like AI generated pictures with some deformed hands or something like that. But I think it's just a matter of time, really. Like it's getting.
We're so good at picking out those stupid little things and focusing on that, when the bigger picture is like, that was magic. Like that, you have to. We all have to acknowledge that was magic, right? That,
totally.
It's that kind of a thing. It's like I've told this story before, so forgive me, audience, but I haven't talked about this with Emil. But it's this idea of 3D printing, right? And it's working all night building this model for you on your behalf. Like, yes, you have to babysit it a little bit because you don't want spaghetti, right? But at the same time, like, so the interaction I had with a senior architect was like, well, why does it take so long? I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, that is literally magic. And it does it while you're sleeping. What do you mean, why does it take so long, right? Like, again, missing the forest for the trees. It's like, I think it's similar with this AI thing. It's like, look at what's going on, big picture. This is a new era. I mean, I hate to say it because you see that all over the place. This is the next iPhone moment, whatever those things are. Like this is a paradigm shift, and the reason I say that is because when was it? It was 2017. I was doing a tech conference in our firm, and it's like, think back 10 years. 10 years ago, did anybody think that every single person was going to basically have a supercomputer in their pocket?
Right.
10 years. That was just 10 years, right? And nobody could raise their hand and say, yes, I totally saw that coming. Nobody, right? I think this is kind of like that. It's like, what is this going to look like in the next 5 years? What is this going to look like in the next 10 years? It's going to be undistinguishable from it's going to be tied into absolutely everything.
Yeah.
For good or for better or for worse. I mean,
No, for sure. I think I had a similar aha moment when I used ChatGPT for the first time, and you realize this is not a chatbot. This is a brain. Like, I think just like understanding that it's not necessarily the interface of me chatting. Like, this is a brain that's automated, that sits on a server and just do stuff. Just like having that tool in the pocket, like deploying brains for different processes. It's just mind blowing, I think.
Second brain, yeah.
Yeah.
This episode is made possible with support from Confluence. Picture this. October 2019, Lexington, Kentucky, the birthplace of Confluence, a place where tech leaders, AEC product developers, and practitioners came together for 3 transformative days. It was more than a conference. It was a confluence of ideas, discussions, and unforgettable social experiences. Since then, over 200 attendees have experienced the magic of Confluence. I've had the privilege of being part of 3 of these remarkable gatherings, 2 in Kentucky and 1 in Orange County. Each one a melting pot of learning, collaboration, and camaraderie around a topic shaping our industry. And now we're thrilled to announce the next regional Confluence event in April 2024 in the vibrant heart of New York City. This time, we dive deep into the realms of AI and machine learning, unraveling their mysteries and potentials in our industry. Are you interested in being part of this exciting journey? To continue the conversation? To shape the future? Visit the link in the show notes for more details. Confluence, where ideas flow, connections form, and the future of AEC technology is shaped, one conversation at a time. My thanks to Confluence for supporting this episode of the Troxel Podcast. And now, let's get back to the conversation. Yeah, so let's talk about Rhino Anywhere. We still have a couple topics that I want to get to here. So let's talk about Rhino Anywhere and this idea of putting Rhino basically into a web browser where you have direct modeling capabilities. You're using fancy terms like pixel streaming going on. And so just break that down for people who don't know what that is and what was interesting to you about chasing after this project.
No, for sure. I mean, I think, modeling is hard. Like 3D modeling is hard, and it's even harder to build good systems that do 3D modeling. That's why you have people like McNeil that have been developing Rhino for, decades.
25 years. They just had their 25th 5-year anniversary, wow. Right?
That's crazy. That's crazy. Yeah. So it takes time, and you can probably build something simple for drawing, a line starting from point A to point B. But like if you actually want to get that, fully fledged 3D modeling environment, that's hard. So, but then on the other hand, you have obviously constraints being, tied to a desktop application. You got to have the Rhino, Rhino installed, and there is a little bit of a process there. And we started to think about like, what if we actually wanted to, well, first of all, have the ability to just get access to essentially Rhino's modeling capabilities in a browser, essentially like going to the browser, typing up an address or a domain, get there, and then you have a 3D modeling environment. And we kind of attacked it from the angle of, this is kind of a library. It's not necessarily a fully fledged product that's ready to go. It's more like, here is a piece of technology, and you can do pretty much whatever you want with it. So we hacked together a little Rhino interface on the web, really. And the way that it works is you have Rhino running on a server. And typically what you do when you want to visualize 3D models on the web is like you send the entire 3D model to the client. But here we actually wanted to try something different. So what we did instead was just to essentially mirror the viewport that was on the server, like in other words, the Rhino viewport, to a browser. So that was one component, just getting the stream of images, really. I mean, if you think about it, like a 3D viewport is just an image, right? So we take that image, we send it to a web client, and then there is communication going the other way around as well. Like from the browser, like you have all these like click events. Like if you now actually see the thing in your browser, you want to be able to click on an object or like select something or maybe like draw something. So there is a stream of input data really like flowing from the client to the server. So then you have this relationship like the browser, the client provides a bunch of inputs, which then the viewport reacts on. And for every change in the viewport, you take that frame, really, like the picture of the viewport, and then send it back to the client. So, I mean, we started to like sketch out a bunch of different ideas what you could do with this. Like you can like create a completely new interface for Rhino. I mean, we talked about like, what if you have disabilities, maybe you don't have any hands, like how would you do 3D modeling then? Like you can completely override all the, typical tooling you would see in a 3D modeling software. Or, other ways. I think another idea, like how do you do 3D modeling for kids? Like, could you like mess around with bigger buttons? Can you like, simplify the user interface a bit more? Just like all these different ideas.
Tinkercad, I think was
Tinkercad, right?
Yeah. The idea of kind of simplifying an interface, right, in a tool that's been around for so long and just it keeps getting more and more complex over time, more buttons, more commands, and because Rhino is a tool for lots of domains, not just architecture, right? There could be a way for you to just pick and choose commands that you want to enable somebody to use and not have to worry about 80% of them or 90% or 95% of them, right? And just say, with these simple, and this is what SketchUp did very successfully, right? It was just like, how do we dial it back into like 8 tools that can do most of what people need to do? And then they made the tool extensible so people could write plugins and do all kinds of other stuff, right? But the idea in the beginning was just like simplify, because as CAD technicians and 3D technicians with very robust tools, it was too overwhelming for most people, right? And so the idea of taking a tool that does exist, that has the richness and the depth and everything that you could possibly want, and then simplifying a UI on top of that and doing it through the web browser and making it available no matter what device you have, it's a kind of an incredible feat that you guys pulled off at a hackathon, right? Like that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, thanks, Evan. I mean, it was a really fun project. I think we had all the components there, really. Like we had an idea of how we could implement it. We had kind of the pitch. I think that's super important to think about in a hackathon project. Like, how do we actually frame this? How do we present it? And what's the value proposition here, etc. Just starting to build out that case in parallel. You work on the implementation and the tool development, and then just have fun. That's also an extremely important aspect of hackathons, and just allow yourself to experiment and mess around and fail and pick it up again and so forth.
Yeah, this was the thing that originally enabled me to reach out to you, was just seeing that. Like it was, I saw your post on LinkedIn about Rhino Anywhere and what you guys had done, and I thought, we need to talk about this because we haven't broached the subject of hackathons on the podcast yet, and so this is a great kind of introduction for people who haven't participated in those, or people who have watched from the sidelines maybe for many years, of why they might want to show up at one of these events and get involved. Because again, like this work that you guys pulled off is going to go back, and it is going to initiate some other ideas in the work that you do in the office, even, I would assume. Like you're inspiring people on the outside, you're going to inspire yourselves, you're going to inspire people on the inside, and that's kind of this magical thing of what hackathons and these symposiums and AEC Tech and other versions of that exist out there can do for people. And I think this is a really vital part of the AEC industry and the AEC Tech community, right? To build those relationships and then just hopefully keep that momentum going beyond this one event and this kind of initial proof of concept. It's like, well, maybe this has legs. Like what kind of feedback have you gotten after showing that off, even outside of the event? Because obviously, like social media posts after these events are everybody's watching them. So I'm sure you've gotten a lot of feedback.
No, for sure. I mean, it's always interesting to see how people react to it, and what kinds of conversations that get started just from seeing it. I mean, there was another year we worked on a project called REST Hopper, which was this was just by the time where Rhino Compute came out. Essentially, the idea of hosting a Rhino process inside of a web server, and we ask ourselves, can we run a Grasshopper script as a backend, essentially? And so we did that for 24 hours. I think this was back in 2018 or something like that. And we were able to develop a quick, dirty little prototype. I mean, it was extremely ugly, but it kind of proved the concept of like, okay, here we have a Grasshopper definition. I think we had a typical, twisted building kind of things. Like you provide some,
Of course.
Always like you have the angle of rotation and all that. And, again, using the browser kind of as an argument to, democratize the design process, and just like opening up these kind of configurators and like systems to other people that might not be on a heavy laptop with Rhino installed. We're able to build that prototype and posted some videos on the internet, and got some pretty good response, and to the point we actually started to talk about making a solution out of it internally at TT. So sometimes that happens as well. Like you actually, it can turn out to be a real project sometimes, and that's also quite fascinating to see. Like sometimes it's more like an inspiration and a conversation starter, like pixel streaming, which we used in the Rhino Anywhere hackathon project. That's been around for a long time, but not necessarily that much in the AEC industry. I mean, in gaming, it's quite common, right? It's like you want to play some really intense, first-person shooter game on your shitty laptop, but and then you essentially rent a server or a computer, you get access to that power of computes really, and then you can play these games. So it's just a way of like starting conversations and potentially even like continue the projects, either like if you do something in the office, or sometimes we see projects kind of resurrect in other hackathons as well. Like, you kind of build on top of what's been developed in previous hackathons. So it's a good conversation starter.
That's cool. Well, let's talk about your other project that you've got going on, Modelup, and what that's about, and why that's something that you're pursuing as well. Because when I looked at your webpage, one of the things that I think it was in the About section at it's modelup.co. Is that correct?
It's modelup3d.com.
Oh, okay. Modelup3d.com. So tell us about that project and what you're doing there.
No, for sure. I mean, I think there is certainly a good link here to what we have discussed previously. So, I mean, it's really the idea of taking, the intelligence of the extremely powerful, parametric design tools that we work with. But I mean, in our context, we kind of have that encapsulated in, our industry. So what we ask ourselves, like, what happens if you actually expose these type of tools in a dummified or simplified versions to a bigger audience? So that's what we do. We develop 3D configurators. Essentially, you have a viewport where you see a 3D model, and then you have some controls to manipulate the 3D model. And obviously extremely inspired by how Grasshopper works, right? Like you have sliders, you have, buttons and, toggles and all that, and, messing around with these parameters will update the model. What we do, we don't necessarily work with neither architects or engineers or, people in the building industry. It's more about targeting kind of a lot of building products, more on the like homeowner side, or we have one company that we work with that produces kind of outdoor rooms, like aluminum systems with glass, really. We help them to build 3D configurators essentially, and it's really, kind of leveraging the computational design tools that we've been working on for so long.
Again, kind of productizing something to productize something, right?
Yeah.
It's like,
no, sort of, yeah.
It's inception. It's the whole idea of configurators, again, kind of new to AEC in that respect. I've seen it with Shapediver as well. Maybe we can talk about the difference between what we're seeing with Shapediver versus Modelup. But the idea of giving somebody else outside of the organization access to a certain number of parameters and options, and making it so that they can make decisions based on the inputs that you provide, I think is super interesting, right? And it gives a practice or a firm the ability to, drive interaction, include people in the decision-making process, but also potentially productize a thing that they've, the logic that goes into making that is that's your IP at that point, right? And it becomes a thing, though, that with their decisions, they can send that information back to you, and you could probably tie costs and all kinds of things to that to automatically provide that information to them. But then you basically have a snapshot of their order, in quotes, right? And that becomes another avenue for you to produce a thing that people then purchase, and it's another maybe a business idea. So.
No, totally. Exactly. I think that's really it. Like the information. Like I think for us being, comfortable with 3D modeling and parametric design, this is kind of basics, right? But for someone who has no idea how to use 3D modeling, maybe doesn't even have a laptop, like being able to generate a visualization of a kitchen, or a do-it-yourself table, or like all these things, and like getting the drawings and bill of materials, it's magic. Like that's magic for them.
Right.
I think it's just really fascinating thinking about parametric design and like computational design and grasshopper logic, and putting that sort of outside our industry, and see the value that can provide is it's pretty immense.
And they don't even need to know it's Grasshopper. They don't need to
know
exactly.
They don't care. Yeah, exactly. They don't care about Grasshopper. Yeah, they just want to build that kitchen, or like the table or chair or whatever. Like just give me the drawings. Like tell me how much material I need to buy, etc. So it's
or place an order.
Or place an order. Exactly. No, for sure.
If you're gonna do all that on your end, that's really a cool idea. And so, you've talked about a couple of ideas, like a chair or a table. Like, give us an idea of the types of configurators that you've built beyond furniture.
Yeah,
do you have the IKEA kitchen generator? Have you duplicated the IKEA
Swedish,
website
of
functionality?
Course.
Yeah.
No, for sure. I think...
so where's the Volvo configurator? What else do we?
Check. Yeah, what else? Spotify configurator, maybe.
Right. Yeah, music playlist configurator. There you go.
Exactly. We have a few projects in the pipeline that I probably can't talk too much about at this stage, but it's kind of mainly targeting like the home owners and home improvement markets.
Nice.
And so that's really like one leg of what we do. So that's the kind of us building our own configurators that we, release, more of a B2C kind of setup. And then we have the other leg, which is the kind of more typical B2B, like, we get in touch with companies, they describe their business and their production system, and we build 3D configurators for them. And that can be also twofold. Either they just want to present something for their customers to, increase sales, or, improve conversions or whatever. or it can be just automating internal processes related to production. And sometimes it's actually both even. It just has a lot of potential when you actually get into these companies with the, parametric design chops, and you can, actually build something. Well, you can prototype it out quite quickly, right? Using Grasshopper. So that's also like one of the, I guess, sales and marketing mechanisms that we've been using quite a lot. Just like that ability to put stuff together on an afternoon. I mean, it's fascinating, and it's people get impressed when they actually see their products in 3D configurable, from that short amount of time.
And maybe this is a bit of an aside, but my gears are turning in my brain with the new stuff that's coming out with Rhino 8, which has recently been released, which is like in Grasshopper being able to reference in Rhino files, blocks, having control over all of these different objects, knowing all their layers, knowing all their materials, and just like further extending the capabilities of, I would guess, these configurators, because now you can pull so much more rich information into them. Like you don't just have to define a curve or define this geometry or a surface or whatever, but it's like, wow, now you could have a library of objects in their own files that you could then pull in and reference into this. And it's like a pretty incredible XREF kind of a system at this point, right? Yeah. Where these things, you bring a Rhino model into Grasshopper so that you can spit it back out the other end. I mean, it's incredible. The possibilities are truly endless. And so the extensibility of this system is just continues to blow me away of what these tools have made us capable of doing as users. So
no, totally. I'm super.
It,
No, for sure. I'm super psyched about the whole push around Rhino 8 and how the McNeil people actually are able to build this out as well. Like, of course, like they have the core business. I talked to Brian from McNeil at some point, and he was describing like, there is one type of Rhino users. They use Rhino, and they do 3D modeling for different things. And then you have like the Grasshopper and scripting folks, and it's actually quite different, and must be quite hard to accommodate both of these audiences, and making sure that both are happy. But I mean, I obviously belong to the Grasshopper and automation and Rhino Common scripting audience, and I'm happy. so it's it's really good to see like all the cool things that are happening. I mean, as you mentioned with the Rhino tab in Grasshopper for Rhino 8, and there is some other really nice developments that's been released with Rhino 8 as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've covered all the bases here. Is there anything else that we're missing that you wanted to put out there for the audience or chat about?
No, I mean, I think, more hackathons. Come to hackathons and organize hackathons. I think it's just an amazing opportunity to, network and get together, have fun, hack on something, dream a bit, actually implementing these dreams, and mess around with new technology and tools and stuff like that. And there aren't actually that many that organizes hackathons in our industry. I mean, there are a few, obviously, like Core Studio TT being one of them, but it doesn't actually require that much. Well, I shouldn't say that because Dave, my colleague, would hate me then. But it's it's not like organizing a conference where you need like a space to sit in and like speakers and all that. It's more like a bunch of people show up and you hack on things, and it's just a fantastic format, and in general just like building communities and making friends, really. So I would encourage people to do that. You
got to bring lots of extension cords and power strips and coffee, right?
That's true.
It's different than a big conference, but there are components that are necessary. I just thinking about like the advancements in just laptop computing in the last decade of what has been capable to be accomplished at a hackathon just because hardware has advanced so much is got to be such a cool thing. Like the things that you guys can hack together in a day is incredible, and you're doing it all on a very portable device. It's pretty neat to watch that happen.
No, for sure. And it's, I think also if I just look at the hackathons that we have hosted for, a decade, like the level of outcomes has been just evolving dramatically. Like it's so impressive to see like how the bar is raised for every year, and it's really fascinating to observe, and it just continues to raise, and it's just a fascinating, playful environment that I think is really, really fun.
So who is not coming to these hackathons that should be? I think that's a good question to ask, because I have an idea, but I want you to answer that first, because it seems to me like it's going to attract the usual suspects. Like you've built this community, there's people who are definitely wired for this, but who should be there, who's not?
That's a good question. I mean, I think there is certainly a level of zooming out a bit. Like, I guess you can just like see your day-to-day work and just like grind on. And, maybe you're not too passionate about what you're doing. Maybe they should actually come. Because it's really like, you actually get to do fun stuff and, think about real problems from a kind of fun perspective. But obviously, like depending on the location, of course, there can be some logistical components to it that can be tricky. So maybe that. What did you think of?
My idea is that firm leadership who is interested in digital transformation or the capacity or the like what it could do, I think they would get so inspired going to a thing like that, and just being an observer and walking around the tables and watching the passion for this, because I think there's still a separation in some firms that there's a digital team, and that's what they're just part. They're another team under the umbrella, and the shift, like I said earlier, going from calling it digital practice or whatever you want to call it to practice is inevitable, right? And so the idea of like this, it's not how we do it. It's like, it's hard. Tools are not a means to the end, but they are the only way that we actually get there nowadays, right? So, it's interesting to me to start to shift the conversation around this is our firm does digital, our firm does sustainability, and thinking about this as a menu of options versus this is the way that we do things, and shifting that in leadership is extremely important for those leaders who are not. They don't have visibility into that because they're not seeing it maybe in their own firm, or they don't know where to look, or they don't know who to ask. Going to a place like this would just, I would think, light an intense fire of FOMO, right? That to me it could be a catalyst then for change on many other levels in the industry that need it, because of course you have this community that is super fired up about this stuff, and like you said, maybe it's even a reprieve from the day-to-day, and it's something new and exciting, and it'll light a fire and get them excited about why they do what they do. And on another level, we need this industry-wide, we need to address the adoption thing, and we need to address that, like raising all boats with the tide kind of a thing, not just unique firms who are willing to invest substantially into this kind of thing, or individuals who are investing in themselves to bring these tools to their firm, and it falling on deaf ears or whatever. Like, so to me, it's like we just need more players in this. And I feel like the grassroots level is there. You're proving it. AEC Tech is a grassroots level thing, but, and Thornton Tomasetti with Core Studio is proving the other model exists too, right? Top down, because of that big investment. But we really I think we need a lot more of that, because I think the grassroots side of it's covered. Right? Like, students learn how to do this stuff in school. They go to a firm and the firm isn't using it, right? And so like you sought out a company that was kind of digital first. There are so many companies out there who are not, and people are trying to get tools into the door and they're going nowhere. And so to kind of flip that, I would say like the invitation needs to go out to firm leadership, not just CEOs, but COOs and other people who are like their day-to-day, like CFOs. Like CFOs want to see innovation and change. Like they're invested in their companies. And I actually see sometimes more passion from a chief financial officer than I do from a chief executive officer as far as innovation and transforming the way that a firm works, because they want to add value to their customers. They want more customers, right? They want more clients, and they want to have an innovative architectural portfolio or engineering portfolio, right? And so they're also going to be a key person at the table who's making decisions about digital transformation in their company. So anyway, that's my soapbox for the end of the episode here.
I think you're totally right. I think, the top brass and more senior folks would really have fun at these kind of events. And I think it's also, some people think of hackathons, like you gotta know how to write code to participate meaningfully in a hackathon, and that's not true. I mean, there is so many aspects to a hack project, and so yeah. I mean, even if you're a C-level executive and you don't know how to code, like you can certainly like be there and have a good time actually participating in projects, or just hang out. Like that's the other model. So for sure, I think you're absolutely right.
I think that idea of kind of flipping the table of like a C-level person is used to being the talker, the decider, the one who is listened to. This flips the tables. Like if you go into an environment like this where the experts are the ones driving the laptops, driving the technology, and just soak it up, just sponge it up. I mean, and just like you said, just kind of go and relax and watch what happens. And I think that would be an incredible opportunity to actually fade a little bit into the background and not have to be the one on stage performing, and instead let the people who are really, really passionate about that and doing that thing be those people, and you get to sit on the other side of the table for once. I think that could just feel really cathartic too. It's like, because then you can go back to your firm and you can enable that to happen at the highest level, and figure out ways to attract that talent to your firm, and figure out ways to get that culture going in your firm. I mean, that to me is what leaders have to do to be relevant in the future anyway, right? So this is a great place to kind of get infused with that in a very meaningful way in a very short period of time.
No, for sure. I think, you get impressed by how much you can accomplish in just 24 hours with, good energy, like a good team, a clear mission. And so, I mean, we've had sort of internal innovation tournaments at TT. We don't call it hackathons, but so that's another way, like deciding, okay, for 2 days, we're just going to, innovate, or like, have ideas tournaments and, see where we can take it in 1 or 2 days. So that's the other takeaway, I think, that can be interesting, that you get a kind of a sense for when you attend a hackathon.
I think that's really important, is to actually separate innovation, in air quotes, from the day-to-day job, because I think there's an expectation on some level that innovation just happens, right? And it does not happen. It's like, we're just trying to solve problems. There's no guarantee innovation, again, in air quotes, will happen. And every company wants to say they're an innovative company and they're innovating with technology or in design or sustainability or whatever it is, right? But to separate this thing out and have these tournaments and actually say, like, okay, we're not worried about billing to projects right now.
No.
We're just interested in incubating ideas, and the value of that process and stretching those muscles and getting that to be part of the culture. That's a great way to do that. I absolutely agree. That's really cool to hear that you do that internally as well in this tournament style.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's fun. I mean, it's I think what I find fascinating, and as you said, like, you always have a bunch of context in your daily work, right? Like you work on this project, and these are the constraints. In hackathons, it's not really like that. It's more like you're starting out from a blank piece of paper, right? So it's that's really enabling, I think. Just like, I can do whatever I want now.
Blue sky.
Yeah,
right?
Blue sky. Like no legacy code base to support here. Let's just go for it. Kind of.
Right. Well, very cool. I appreciate this conversation. It's been really fun to talk to you, Emil. So I'm going to put links to hopefully everything that we've talked about. So we'll have Thornton Tomasetti, we'll have Core Studio, we'll have the AEC Tech Hackathon, we'll have modelup3d.com. Is there anywhere else that people can follow along with what you're doing? I'll put a link to your LinkedIn page as well, but I think that might cover it all. But if there's anything else, let me know.
No, I think that's perfect. I mean, I use Twitter and LinkedIn mostly. So yeah.
Okay, great. Well,
Awesome.
thanks for this conversation. It's been great.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ivan. Pleasure to be here chatting with you.
Thanks to our sponsors, and thanks to our members this week. Find out how you can become a member at trxl.co, and I'll talk to you again next week.